The King's Avatar, Chapter 1500. I need to complete it. Audio source, whooshouworldaudiobook.com. Chapter 1500. I need to complete it. Translator, Nomyami. Editor, Nomyami. Several shadow specters coiled around Desert Dust, grasping ghosts. It dealt damage over time and amplified the damage dealt by the warlock. When the skill ended, the warlock would be healed 33% of the total damage dealt to the target during the duration of the skill. It was a skill that dealt damage, debuffed the target, and healed the user. When it first came out, everyone thought it was a completely broken skill. However, after some time, people figured out that while the skill wasn't bad, it wasn't broken because the effects of the skill were rather weak. Even so, it was a must-have skill for warlocks. Wei Chen knew that he was guaranteed to land a hit, so he started with this skill before continuing his assault. Chaotic Rain continued. Han Wenqing looked completely helpless. Was he going to keep getting played like a trapped animal? Tyranny's fans burst out in fury. When had their captain ever suffered such humiliation? Jump. Everyone thought to themselves. So what if he became confused? The outcome is going to be bad anyways, but being trapped like this and getting trampled on was too stifling. From their understanding of Han Wenqing, they didn't think Han Wenqing would be willing to resign himself to this kind of fate. However, Desert Dust didn't move. Shadow Flames. Windward Formation cast another spell. Dark purple flames began to whirl around Desert Dust. These 6 seconds of flames didn't only burn down Desert Dust's health, but the hearts of every Tyranny fan as well. Why isn't he jumping? They couldn't understand. The Desert Dust in front of them was slowly drifting away from the Desert Dust in their hearts. What self-control. Fang Rui sighed. Yeah, Yi Xiu nodded his head. Not only had Han Wenqing learned the word retreat, he became even more unyielding. His style had changed to the extent that those familiar with him couldn't recognize it anymore. On the playoffs stage, these changes only became more apparent. How surprising. I thought you'd jump. Wei Chen poked at his weak spot. Han Wenqing didn't reply. In the meantime, Windward Formation started casting his third spell. With the duration of Chaotic Rain, he knew that his third skill would land. Darkness ripped apart the air. Windward Formation had summoned Death's Door. How shameless. Countless people cursed in their hearts. In terms of ruthlessness, there was nothing to pick at. Wei Chen's methods didn't carry a shred of restraint. He wanted to annihilate his opponent. The tear appeared in the sky, revealing an imposing Death's Door. The Chaotic Rain stopped. Whoosh! A figure jumped from a windowsill. Who else could it be but Desert Dust? He had been forced into a location that would provide cover from Chaotic Rain and then forcefully tank 2 skills. He had looked completely helpless at the time. But when the last drop of rain fell, he immediately jumped. The Death's Door next to him. It was as if Han Wenqing couldn't see it. Desert Dust went straight for Windward Formation. Determined and decisive without any hesitation. In this instant, the Han Wenqing that everyone was familiar with had returned. Tyranny's fans didn't have time to adjust their emotions, involuntarily letting out a cheer. Tendrils of darkness extended out from Death's Door, its target even bumping into it as it scurried away. The darkness immediately gave chase. Han Wenqing ignored it. Desert Dust used the wall as a foothold and continued jumping. Keep charging forward even if the darkness behind him was in pursuit. The fans of Tyranny stood up from their seats. They had completely forgotten about their indignation a few seconds ago from seeing Desert Dust cowering under that window. Punch! Desert Dust had swung his fist. And Windward Formation? Windward Formation wasn't able to escape in time. To attack Desert Dust, he had dropped down from his original position, moving closer to where his target was. This change in position became Han Wenking's opportunity to attack. This decisiveness and ferocity had been outside of Wei Chen's expectations. He had calculated that Death's Door would be cast the moment Chaotic Rain ended. He had thought that there was enough time, but now, he discovered that what he thought was enough was far from it in front of Han Wenking's valor. Just a bit more, and the tendrils of darkness would catch Desert Dust, but it was too late. Desert Dust's fist had already reached Windward Formation. Bang! Hit! A solid punch had landed. However, the slight pause from the punch was enough for the darkness to catch Desert Dust. The tendrils quickly coiled around him. Was this punch just to vent his anger? Everyone thought to themselves. But for Tyranny's fans, even if it was just that, it felt incredibly satisfying. To them, the journey was more important than the destination. But Han Wenking's thoughts weren't so simple. After the punch landed, Desert Dust grabbed with his two hands. Back throw. Windward Formation had been grabbed by him, and Desert Dust had been grabbed by Death's Door. Both of them were dragged away. The two were dragged together towards the Death's Door, which then burst into a cloud of darkness. Death's Door had accomplished its mission and disappeared. The two dropped from the sky. One on top, one below. One slow, one fast. The faster one was Windward Formation. Although he wasn't affected by Death's Door, the back throw wasn't something the Death's Door could interrupt. Desert Dust was able to complete the back throw, flinging Windward Formation crashing down. As a result, Windward Formation fell faster. On the other hand, Desert Dust took the damage from Death's Door before free-falling down. While in the air, Desert Dust assumed an offensive posture. Wei Chen was helpless though. Windward Formation wasn't free-falling. He had been tossed by back throw. Before he hit the ground, he would be in a stunned state. He could only watch as Desert Dust raise his foot, eagle stamp. Desert Dust dove down as if he were an eagle catching its prey. However, Windward Formation could do nothing. Sigh. Wei Chen let out a gentle sigh. I was too slow. If he had reacted faster or put in the inputs faster, perhaps that punch wouldn't have landed, or he might have been able to dodge the back throw. In either case, he wouldn't be in his current predicament. While stunned, he could only watch as the eagle stamp came towards him. The instant the skill effect ended, would he be able to dodge in time? Wei Chen felt a tremble in his heart. His fingers were starting to go stiff. It was another contest of reaction speed and hand speed. That was what he was most afraid of and what he was weakest at. But that's the only way to get out of this predicament. If he was hit by the eagle stamp and let Han Wenking close in onto him, his fate would be sealed. Focus. Wei Chen grit his teeth. He was no longer looking at Desert Dust, but carefully feeling Windward Formation's condition. The instant the stun ended, he would immediately act. I can move. All of these thoughts happened in an instant. Wei Chen felt that the stun had worn off. In that instant, his mind was blank. He had forgotten about the match, he had forgotten what he was doing. WuxRWorldAudio.com. He only had one thought: complete it, complete this input. Windward Formation raised his two hands in front of him. Bang! Desert Dust's eagle stamp was kicked Windward Formation's chest. Oh! Tyranny's fans cheered for a moment before abruptly stopping. Windward Formation puffed into smoke and dispersed into the air as Desert Dust continued to fall. Han Wenking turned around. Windward Formation was back on the wall on the side of the manor. Shadow clone technique. I did it. Wei Chen's heart was beating intensely. The lingering fear from the narrow escape from death made his whole body turn soft. It was just a low-level skill, but because of the focus he had put in, he felt like collapsing from exhaustion. But it's not over yet. The battle had only just begun. Wei Chen immediately continued. Windward Formation started casting another spell from the wall. Soul Slice. A blade of darkness cut through the air. In this situation, at this distance, Wei Chen didn't think of using a high-level skill for a setup. He simply wanted to take advantage of the fact that Desert Dust was in the air and could not dodge, so he could deal some damage. He predicted where Desert Dust would land and aimed his Soul Slice. However, Eagle Stamp wasn't as simple as just a stomp. Han Wenqing saw Windward Formation casting a spell and immediately finished his Eagle Stamp. Pa pa pa. Desert Dust stepped in the air 3 times. He didn't hit his target, but he used these steps to slow his speed down a little bit. But it still hit in the end. Wei Chen was a crafty old fox. This little trick wasn't going to mess him up. But apart from damage, the Soul Slice didn't do anything else. Desert Dust landed on the ground and darted towards the manor in pursuit. As for Windward Formation, he was once again climbing towards the roof in a fluster. We're not going to see a repeat of what we just saw, right? Many of the viewers started to worry. No. Li Yibo dispelled these doubts from the audience. His skills aren't off cooldown yet. How could we get a repeat so soon? Li Yibo said. Of course, he can't use the same skills, but does he have the tools to do something similar as before? Pan Lin said. Li Yibo thought carefully about the Warlock's kit. It shouldn't be possible, right? He wasn't certain though, so he didn't say it. End chapter. The King's Avatar. Chapter 1501. Sneaky Acting. Audio source. WuxaWorldAudiobook.com. Chapter 1501. Sneaky Acting. Translator, Nomyami. Editor, Nomyami. Jump jump jump. The two characters were both jumping non-stop on the manor wall. Windward Formation didn't use any skills to disrupt him, nor did Desert Dust use any techniques to harass him. But just this kind of jumping and climbing was already enough to render the watching players dumbstruck. The map came from an in-game environment, and the online arena also had this map. With the vast number of Glory players, there were players who had visited this manor in-universe, and of course there were also those who liked to play on this map in the arena. But, to so easily leap and scale the side of this manor, this was evidently outside of the experience of ordinary players. After this match, those Glory players who liked this map would probably once again begin to pay attention to this kind of technique of scaling the manor wall. It was in this manner that professional matches were at the forefront of Glory trends. And of the two people on the field right now, Wei Chen was more familiar with the map, while Han Wenqing, having played so many battles, was extremely adaptive. Neither player's controls revealed any flaws. But Han Wenqing's Desert Dust was still slightly faster. This wasn't because of any difference in skill, it was a result of the differences between their characters. Strikers were simply more nimble than Warlocks, and had superior movement and jumping ability. But he probably couldn't catch up, right? Looking at the distance between the two characters, if they set the roof as the target, it didn't seem like Desert Dust had enough time to catch up to Windward Formation. Then, once Windward Formation reached the roof, he definitely wouldn't hold back in unleashing a harsh attack down upon Desert Dust, right? Wei Chen didn't disappoint. Tossing stones at someone who had fallen into a well, that sort of thing was something he loved to do. Little Han, catch. As soon as he successfully reached the roof, the panic he'd shown earlier completely disappeared. Trash talk was joyfully resurrected in the match chat. Nothing had even happened to Han Wenqing yet, but Tyranny's die-hard fans were already getting nervous. This Wei Chen clearly was limited in his ability, but as soon as he achieved a slight advantage, he simply made people extremely uncomfortable. That sort of completely unconcealed, dirty and shameless play, it really made people both annoyed and fearful. Whoosh 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 whoosh. Standing on the high ground, Windward Formation waved his death's hand, letting loose curse arrows, and he sent them scattering in various directions, making them fall like chaotic rain. They pattered down, taking advantage of the fact that there were limited footholds on the wall, and very little space to dodge. But Desert Dust's arms trembled, reinforced iron bones. Super armor was activated, and then Han Wenking directly ignored the damage he took from curse arrows, and continued to use his fastest speed to travel the shortest path. Wei Chen smiled slightly, and Windward Formation continued to sway his scepter. Hexagram Prison. Suddenly, 6 beams of light appeared in the air, falling straight down. And the prediction involved in casting this skill wasn't cheap at all. Wei Chen correctly calculated the path Han Wenking would take, and predicted where Desert Dust would step. But the skill didn't target the footholds, it targeted the mid-air path Desert Dust took as he jumped. This was naturally harder than locking in on the footholds, but it was harder for the opponent to dodge, as well. Wei Chen's reaction speed and hand speed weren't fast enough, but he was very confident in his accuracy when he stood up here and could calmly cast skills. The pillars of light came down, and it looked like the mid-air Desert Dust had no way of dodging. But just when it looked like he was about to hit, Desert Dust's body suddenly plunged. 1,000-ton drop. Han Wenking controlled his character to use this skill. Desert Dust plummeted, even faster than the pillars of light were coming down. Just like that, he instantly put some distance between himself and the attack, and his foot landed on another foothold. Hua. 1,000-ton drop was an attacking skill. When his foot hit this foothold, it was instantly crushed by this stomp, and rubble skittered down. But it was enough for Desert Dust to get some force, and he leapt to the side. The 6 pillars of light brushed right past him. Desert Dust successfully dodged this attack, and continued upward without hesitation. TSK TSK TSK, starting to wreck this place again? Careful not to wreck yourself. Wei Chen reproached him in the chat. For Han Wenking, who still hadn't successfully made it to the top, breaking a foothold really wasn't good news for him at all. Death's hand waved once again. Soul Strike. Black light flashed outward. Warlock skills carried many annoying side effects, and this skill was no exception. Soul Strike, as the name implied, directly attacked the target's soul, causing the target to enter a trance state. In-game, this meant that the target's controls had no effect. Even though the effects of this skill lasted only for a very short amount of time, this was undoubtedly a powerful interrupt skill, and it could interrupt not only casts, but any sort of movement. Take the current situation for example. Leaping up the wall required extremely precise controls. Jumping a distance of 3 body lengths versus 4 body lengths certainly required different amounts of jumping force. And this was all dependent upon the player to control and react. At this moment, if someone was about to initiate a 4 body length jump and was currently adjusting the amount of power to put into the jump, and was suddenly hit by a soul strike, then the jump power might only reach that of a 2 body length jump, and the rest of the power would be lost. With that, trying to jump a 4 body length gap with only a 2 body length jump, wouldn't he just fall? And Wei Chen had seized upon this moment exactly. The black light flashed in front of Desert Dust, who was just landing. But his body swung. The black light just barely flashed past Desert Dust. This soul strike, Han Wenking had actually managed to dodge it. Oh. The Tyranny fans, letting out a breath in relief, were very happy. This time, Wei Chen didn't feel like spitting any words in the chat. His mood grew very serious. If this soul strike hadn't successfully interrupted Desert Dust's jump power, then that could just be attributed to luck. But it had missed altogether. How? Wei Chen was very confident in the accuracy of his judgment and control. This attack he had calculated very well. But he had still been too slow. Wei Chen hurriedly began casting another skill. Binding Curse. Another flash of light, but it missed again. In such an advantageous condition, he had actually missed 2 times in a row. The happy fans lamented his bad luck, but Wei Chen knew that that definitely wasn't the case. After one missed the second time, his prediction and controls had been even more careful. This second miss shouldn't be because of any problem on his end. Han Wenqing adjusted the rhythm. Watching the match, Yi Shi had already seen what the problem was. The adjustment is very subtle, Fang Rui said. It seemed like a very normal adjustment, but coming from Han Wenqing, suddenly it seemed rather abnormal. Han Wenqing, who had always been a very open and direct player, would actually use this kind of fine-tuning on his rhythm, so slight that it was extremely difficult to detect. Has this guy really become so interesting now? Yi Shi mused. Windward formation continued to cast. Another curse, another miss. Ha! The Tyranny fans in the stadium had begun to jeer and shout. This dirty playing guy, he tried to play dirty but his attacks missed. It was extremely rewarding to watch. Old Wei still hasn't noticed. Fang Rui furrowed his brow. Even though Wei Chen might not compare to them in terms of pro experience, he had never left glory after so many years, so his eyes were sharp. Han Wenqing's adjustment might be slight, but not so slight that Wei Chen wouldn't be able to detect it, right? Just as he said this, the fourth spell missed as well. This is bad, Fang Rui shouted, slapping his leg. A curse missing wasn't a big deal, but the key was that this fourth curse, compared to the others, was clearly a bit more rushed. Instead of patiently waiting for the best opportunity, Wei Chen had cast it immediately after the third one missed, and hurriedly released it as soon as it was ready. The panic of climbing the wall was resurfacing. Missing all of these skills in a row made Wei Chen very anxious. After the fourth curse missed, he again hurriedly began casting a fifth. But by this time, Desert Dust was already almost at the roof. This skill was probably Wei Chen's last chance at a merciless attack. If he missed again, Wei Chen would lose his positional advantage. And this time Wei Chen seemed even more panicked, because he used an even faster skill. Soul Slice. A blade of black light flashed outward toward Desert Dust. But just by looking at the moment he released the skill, the experienced players were already sighing. He released it early. Huang Shaoshan had already texted such a lament to Yuan Zhu, and he was already in the process of writing a new one, too. Boss Wei's a bit too nervous. But just as he was burying his head in the text, an unexpected situation suddenly emerged on stage. The Soul Slice didn't hit. WuxaWorldAudio.com. Desert Dust stepped on the final foothold, but just when he was about to reach the roof, but his character suddenly started falling. How? Everyone was shocked. The broadcast director reacted swiftly, splitting the screen to show a replay. That moment that Desert Dust landed on that last foothold, it shattered from the impact, and he fell with it. Little Han, catch. High-spirited trash talk once again floated into the chat. Everyone was dumbfounded, including Wei Chen's teammates. Fuck. Fang Rui was slapping his leg again. As expected of the master of dirty playing, as soon as he saw this result, he instantly understood what Wei Chen had done. He'd been pretending. It was all an act. This guy had also probably detected the slight adjustments Han Wenking had made to his rhythm. But these adjustments were changing often, so even if he could tell the rhythm was changing, it would be very difficult for him to grasp it. And so, Wei Chen pretended that he couldn't grasp it at all. He missed skill after skill, and he even adjusted his own rhythm to give off the impression that he was panicked and rushed. Even Fang Rui, this master of dirty play, had been fooled. Did it even have to be said how superb this acting was? And so, the final killing blow simply came from landing on the final foothold. How come it didn't hold? Wei Chen had messed with it, of course. Even as desert dust fell, Han Wenking was still resolute. He pulled his view downward, and could already see another foothold below him, but whoosh! Black light flashed past. The soul slice cut that foothold. The missed soul slice had never been targeting desert dust. Wei Chen put on a good show. And at this moment, Death's hand flashed with magic energy, gathering into a rain cloud, chaotic rain. The skill's cooldown had finally ended, and it was once again cast by Windward Formation. And this time, desert dust had absolutely no way of dodging. The chaotic rain poured down, bringing the confusion, and desert dust continued to plummet. There might have been more footholds further down, but under the confusion status, how could he possibly find them? And at the very bottom, on the ground, unnatural wind blew. The powerful skill, Winding Wraiths, was already ready to welcome desert dust. Huang Shaoshan, who had still been in the middle of expressing his emotions to Yu Wenzu in a text, stared with his mouth hanging open. He put his phone down. The battle was decided. A target controlled by a warlock to this extent had no possibility of escape. In the deciding battle of the group arena, Wei Chen won. In the group arena, Happy won, and Chapter The King's Avatar, Chapter 1502 Rivals of 10 Years Meet Once More. Audio source, WushAWorldAudiobook.com. Chapter 1502, Rivals of 10 Years Meet Once More. Translator, Nomyami. Editor, Nomyami. Hey, little Han, you're still too green. This was the last message Wei Chen left in the group arena chat, something that was enough to make all glory players spit blood. If even Han Wenking was still too green, then was there even anyone who could be considered a veteran? That boast was just completely illogical. However, this was Happy's home stadium. As Happy fans, this was something they could totally laugh about. However, for Tyranny fans it was frustrating. They wouldn't fear losing, but losing to a guy like this was absolutely disgusting, especially when the one who lost was their most respected captain, Han Wenking. No one would blame Han Wenking for this loss. They had seen his usual courage and determination. It was this opponent. He was too sly, too tricky, too shameless. Perhaps, on some level, this kind of opponent was the bane of Han Wenking's straightforward style. The group arena had ended, and the two players walked out of their booths simultaneously. Wei Chen, of course, wore a face full of joy, waving at the crowd while shamelessly making a whole lap around the stadium. Even the wild cheers when he passed by the stands for the guest team fans didn't dampen his smile. In fact, his smile just grew, and he was even more enthusiastic in his waving. The security were restless, as if prepared to face a monster. These were Tyranny fans they were talking about. Was this guy looking to get killed, provoking the Tyranny fans like that? They hurriedly arranged for more people over here while they sent people to try and talk Wei Chen down from his celebrating. Wei Chen didn't give them any trouble, finishing his rounds and returning to the Happy player bench. Happy's members had stood to welcome their hero back. Sit, please, sit. Wei Chen energetically waved his hands at them. Everyone laughed. None of them said anything about the way he was behaving because they all knew how important this victory was to Wei Chen, how hard he worked for it. "It's all up to you guys now," Wei Chen then said. Next up was the team captain, and he wasn't in the lineup. "Don't worry." Ye Xiu nodded at him. Huff. Wei Chen exhaled heavily and looked back at the screen. Everything he had accomplished, the victory he had earned, it was all clearly recorded there. This might not be the most spectacular victory he had claimed, but it was definitely the most satisfying. Time wouldn't let him remain in this moment, but he knew he would never forget any of this. With the group arena at an end, Happy had a 1-point lead. The effect of their victory on their morale was significant, though realistically speaking, a lead of 1 point was negligible in the team competition. Neither team returned to their battle prep rooms, making their arrangements for the team competition right then and there. The match was only just beginning. The two teams made surprisingly synchronized pep talks. For Happy, it was mostly reminding everyone that they shouldn't drop their guard due to their lead from the group arena. For Tyranny, it was about not letting the group arena results get them down. However, the gist of both was the same: a 1-point lead was nothing. Both teams were solemn. After boasting for a while, Wei Chen tactfully quieted down, analyzing their path of action in the team competition seriously with the others. Time flew by, and the referee was already on the outskirts of the stage, staring at his watch and getting ready to call the teams to the stage. Team Tyranny, with a 1-point disadvantage, rose from their seats first and headed for the stage without needing prompting from the referee. Han Wenqing, Lin Jingyan, Zhang Jiale, Chen Miyun, Zhang Xinji, and sixth player Bai Yanfei. This was the formation that Tyranny used last season to charge into the championships, as well as what people viewed as their core formation. It was just that Han Wenqing, Lin Jingyan and Zhang Jiale were on rotation this season, and with the addition of their new little general Song Qiang, this formation rarely appeared. It didn't even appear in the first round of the playoffs. Yet now, against Happy, in their first away game, Tyranny used the formation they had used to aim for the championships last season. Tyranny's fans started clapping, screaming, cheering their team on. And on Happy's side, Captain Ye Xiu merely glanced over nonchalantly when the cheering started before turning back and continuing to speak. However, the match was about to start, so Ye Xiu finished his pep talk with a few last sentences. "Let's go." Quote. With that, Team Happy's players also stood. Ye Xiu, Su Mucheng, Fang Rui, Tang Rou, and Wen Yi. None of them were unexpected, but the last player. "Who is this?" Pan Lin inquired in the broadcast, hesitant. "Luo Ji? Happy is putting Luo Ji." Pan Lin said, shocked. Luo Ji. The name felt foreign on his tongue because he rarely ever had to say this name in the broadcast. In the regular season, Happy rarely sent Luo Ji up. It was only near the end of the season that he saw more match time. However, Luo Ji was different from Wei Chen. Wei Chen's sudden participation at the end of the regular season was clearly to help him adjust his state in preparation for the playoffs. But what about Luo Ji? Luo Ji was a rookie, a young player. His participation was, everyone guessed, a form of acquiring battle experience while the circumstances allowed it. From these few matches, everyone could see that Luo Ji was special, but he wasn't particularly skilled yet. Perhaps he was a player with potential, with a future AEAD of him, but right now, he need more time to grow. That's what everyone thought. However, Luo Ji had appeared in the second round of the playoffs, in the roster for Happy and Tyranny's team competition. Is there some mistake? Pan Lin wasn't sure if he should believe his eyes. What if Luo Ji just so happened to stand up? But it wasn't so. The team lineups were already being displayed on the big screen. Not only was Luoji's name among them, it was in the starting 5 as well. Happy had arranged for Tang Rou to be the 6th player. It wasn't possible that this was just a chance for a rookie to acquire battle experience, not here in the playoffs. On this battlefield, there was no holding back. Then, could it be that Luoji was a weapon that Happy planned on using against Tyranny? Discussions erupted in the venue and online. Pan Lin once again asked for Li Yibo to give his professional analysis. In the end, Li Yibo managed to avoid a proper explanation by explaining Luoji's playstyle. The two sides lined up, facing each other on the stage. The first to shake hands were, naturally, the two captains. Rivals of 10 years. The two had faced each other in all 4 finals of the first 4 seasons. It was also on this stage that their paths became intimately entwined, pitted against one another. In the next seasons, the 5th, the 6th, the 7th, the two teams didn't clash. Excellence era began their fall from grace, and Han Wenking, too, began to fall. Everything spoke to them, telling them that their era had ended. Professional glory had entered a new era of those that came after. Wuxia Then, in Season 8, Yizhu retired, bidding this stage farewell, and Han Wenking became the only first-generation player that was still struggling through this battlefield. That season, Team Tyranny was quickly eliminated from the playoffs. The people sighed wistfully, witnessing the end of an era. Who would have thought that in the 9th season Team Tyranny would invite a bunch of veterans and stand once more at the highest stage of glory? Then, in the 10th season, Yizhu led his very own team back into the league. Now, these two once again were shaking hands on this very stage where their rivalry grew. Had that era returned? Seeing this scene, some older fans of Glory found their minds wandering. The battles between these two, it was the memories of that past era. Everyone thought that era had ended, but how come these two were meeting here once more? You've improved, Yizhu said, shaking Han Wenking's hand. They were rivals, but perhaps it was he that understood the one standing in front of him the most. Once upon a time, Yizhu had put his everything into defeating this man. He was familiar with Han Wenking's awareness, mechanics, methods, and he would be the first to notice the slightest change. Your unspecialized isn't bad either, Han Wenking replied. He had changed, but he definitely hadn't changed nearly as much as this guy. In the resolution of his pro career, he had given up on his best and most familiar battle mage for the strange class known as the unspecialized. However, Han Wenking understood more than anyone how the unspecialized might suit Yizhu, so, because like Yizhu knew him, he also knew Yizhu. Glory textbook, this title was no exaggeration, he was more knowledgeable than one could imagine. It's not too late to surrender, Yizhu said. Are you talking to me? Han Wenking's reply was cold. Surrender. That word didn't exist in his dictionary. Yizhu chuckled, but said no more, shaking hands with each of Tyranny's members one by one. Zhang Xinji, Zhang Jiale, Lin Jingyan. These were old opponents that he couldn't be more familiar with. The so-called, that era, wasn't something created by just the two of them. Countless people had already left this battlefield, but who knew if they were watching the ones who were still fighting for glory from whatever corner of the world they were in. The players of the two teams headed towards their booths, their characters loading into the map. Some of these characters were more than familiar to the public, but some had only appeared beginning this season. Perhaps, compared to the players, these characters would be better at preserving the legacy of glory. When the day came that Yizhu, Han Wenking, Zhang Jiale and the others left this battlefield for good, the characters that they once used would continue to carry everything they had left behind. The second round of the playoffs, Happy's home game against Tyranny, let the team compete and begin. End chapter.